This year, Xiaomi introduced the Xiaomi 14 and the 14 Ultra. Of course, a heavy focus on my channel is on the camera, but how does the small one compare to the big brother, the Ultra? Let's find out in this video and showcase the differences between the two. Now, before we start showcasing differences, let's talk about the camera hardware difference. We get a 50 megapixel main sensor on the Xiaomi 14 with a 1.6 aperture, 23mm wide and a 1/1.3 inch sensor size. We get a 50 megapixel telephoto, which is 75mm equivalent, and an f-stop of 2.0. And then for the ultra wide, we get a 50 megapixel as well with an f-stop of 2.2, 40mm, and that is 115 degrees field of view. When it comes to the Xiaomi 14 Ultra, however, we get a 50 megapixel with a variable aperture. We get from 1.6 to 4.0, 23mm wide and a 1 inch sensor size. When it comes to the telephoto, it's again a 50 megapixel sensor with an f-stop of 1.8 and a 1/2.51 inch sensor size. Then of course we get the periscope, which is a 50 megapixel sensor with an f-stop of 2.5 and 120mm equivalent with a 1/2.51 inch sensor size. For the ultra wide, we get a 50 megapixel sensor as well with an f-stop of 1.8 and 12mm equivalent, and of course also a 1/2.51 inch sensor size. Now for this comparison, we are at Paard van Marken in the Netherlands, and we are starting with the 3.2 times zoom. Now while they share a lot of similarities in terms of hardware and by who it is tuned, there are some differences. The Xiaomi 14 Ultra, for instance, has the better dynamic range. It also looks more contrasty and less bright. The 14 at some parts looks a little bit flatter, but in turn it does have that little bit of warmth in the clouds that I like in this case. This same effect can be seen with the main sensor. Again, better dynamic range control with the 14, nicer contrast and better details out of the two. I would say better in terms of colors for the 14 Ultra as well. But you can also see the larger sensor effect here with more depth of field for the foreground. Here again, I would pick the 14 Ultra over the two. Using our authentic mode here on both, it's pretty similar in approach. Depth of field feels the same, but there are some differences in terms of colors, with the Xiaomi 14 being a little bit warmer. And for me, here also the shot that I prefer. In terms of colors for the tractor, it was a little bit closer to what the Xiaomi 14 Ultra showcases. In this shot again, the 14 Ultra is clearly the winner. It has better dynamic range control out of the two, and the Xiaomi 14 seems a bit too sharp for my taste, using the main sensor on both. Zooming in again with the 3.2 times zoom, the whites on the Xiaomi 14 are a bit too bright for my liking, and it does miss a bit of the contrast that I like on the 14 Ultra here. But in turn, we do get a bit of that warmer sky that I do like on the 14 in this case. A bit less would have been better, but it works for this shot. Also, notice how much better the 14 Ultra captures the bugs. Now here again, we can clearly see that there are similarities between the two and that we are dealing with the same brand while using authentic on both. However, there are some noticeable differences. Shadows are more dramatic on the 14 Ultra and the green is definitely deeper on the 14 Ultra, where the 14 feels a little bit brighter in terms of the overall shot, making me choose the 14 Ultra over the 14 here. For this barn shot, I would say, using the 3.2 times zoom, that the 14 here, in this case, beats the 14 Ultra. It has better highlight control and the tiles on the roof look far more detailed, as well as the color on the roof being a bit off on the 14 Ultra. Now here it comes down to really nitty gritty, starting to pixel peep and so on, because images look very similar. We get similar colors, we get similar approaches with some small difference between the two. I would say both of them perform very well, and honestly the difference in some cases is really neglectable. For this authentic black and white ultra wide shot, again the approach for both is really close to being the same. A slight difference in terms of contrast, but apart from that, not really much in between the two. And I would say both of them are doing a really good job in this kind of shot. Now this is the last one before I showcase just two images next to each other with music, so you can judge for yourself as well. In this beach walk shot, there are only slight differences between the 14 and the 14 Ultra. The 14 Ultra is a bit more detailed compared to the 14 when using the main sensor. And I would say that I prefer this shot for the 14 Ultra because it does have that little bit more detail without over sharpening it. Because of course, sharpening is in detail. And I think the Xiaomi 14 Ultra balanced it well in this shot when it comes to that. Now when it comes to video recording, there's an issue. I may or may not kind of have misplaced the ones for the 14. So we're gonna have to do it a little bit different. I'm gonna showcase how both of them are able to record, but I'm not gonna be able to have a comparison where I showcase the differences between the two side by side. I simply know the experience on both of them, and I would say when it comes to video recording, my preference has the Ultra, but it's not like it's going to be a big difference between the two. I also want to quickly note when it comes to video recording, for the 14 and 14 Ultra, there is a difference. With the 14 Ultra, you can select different focal lengths while recording. With the 14, you actually have to zoom in by pinching in or using that bar that is on the side itself. Or zoom out, of course, if you're gonna go to the ultra wide. This is not my preference. I do like it when I can quickly swap between different focal lengths. Yes, there are some, of course, situations where I want to pinch in and zoom in, but when it comes down to it, I still have the possibility on the 14 Ultra. But if I quickly want to switch to a different focal length using the sensors that are made for it, it's definitely a benefit to have that quick button that you can press. Now, because of my mess up when it comes to losing the footage between the 14 and 14 Ultra where I could directly compare the two, again, I'm sorry for that. I know that that's something important and I should pay better attention to that. But somehow I lost it while transferring all the files from the 14 to my PC and I don't know where it is. I tried looking on it a lot and I just simply couldn't find it. So my apologies for that. But let's talk about the experience between the two and the main differences. I don't think there's much difference between the two. Yeah, there are some slight feature differences like 4K 120 frames per second. Out of my head, the 14 doesn't support that. But also the biggest difference for me is in terms of using it. The 14 doesn't have that you can select quickly between the different focal lengths. At least not at the moment that I used it with the latest update before I sold it. When it comes to the 14 Ultra, you can still pinch in to zoom in or out, but when it comes to the 14 Ultra, you can also select the different focal lengths that represent each lens on the back. So I can go from the ultra wide to the telephoto to the periscope by simply clicking that button. With the 14, I could not. Therefore, when it comes to video recording capabilities and the ease of use, I would definitely prefer the 14 Ultra over the 14. When it comes to noise, it's about the same. They're both not great, they're both not bad. I think they're somewhat mid-par, but I think they could do better when it comes to audio control. But in some situations, I would say that the 14 Ultra does do a pretty good job when it comes to audio as well. Something to keep in mind when it comes to video recording on both the Xiaomi 14 and the 14 Ultra. The moment that you have HDR on, you are limited to 4K and 30 frames per second when it comes to this video recording. Turn it off and you can go up to 8K. Now, of course, we gotta discuss low light as well. Here, the sensor size difference can actually matter when it comes to low light recording. Lucky enough, I did manage to get some footage of that one. But when it comes to low light, yeah, that definitely can be a benefit in terms of the sensor size difference when it comes to this 14 Ultra. Anyway, let's dive into that. Starting with this shot. Apart from some color differences, the 14 clearly has a bit of the warmer tone. Out of the two, well, they have a similar approach. And in terms of depth, you can see that on the bush on the left side, there's a little bit more depth on the 14 Ultra because of using, of course, a larger sensor. Zooming in with the 3.2 times zoom, again I would say a very similar approach, but some slight color differences between the two. Again, I would say that the 14 Ultra is a bit closer in reality than the 14, but both of them doing an excellent job here. In this shot again, you can see the difference in approach. The wides are wider on the 14, and here, funny enough, the 14 Ultra is the warmer out of the two, where the 14 was that beforehand. Using the ultra wide, we can see a clear difference. The 14 Ultra, of course, does have a much wider field of view when it comes to the ultra wide, but funny enough, the 14 has the better dynamic range control and it looks better in terms of a low light shot and feels more detailed. Using the 3.2 times zoom on both, the Xiaomi 14 is clearly the warmer shot and I would say it's slightly closer to reality with it. However, the 14 Ultra does get better focus and is more detailed. With both, however, not great control over the lights itself, so not the best dynamic range here. Here another ultra wide shot. The 14 Ultra feels more saturated than the 14. And with that part, I would say the 14 is closer to reality. With that being said, the night view feels better preserved on the Xiaomi 14 Ultra. Using the 3.2 times zoom on both again, the Xiaomi 14 Ultra does a much better job here. While both have some artificial sharpening going on, the 14 Ultra is far more detailed and has less noise than on the 14. Here, honestly, it's not even close, and the 14 Ultra in this case easily wins it. Now another ultra wide shot. Both have some artifacts going on with of course the flares, but there are some differences. The 14 Ultra overall is a little bit warmer, but the 14 feels more saturated. I would say the 14 Ultra again here is a little bit closer to reality apart from the whites itself. Using the main sensor on both, that bit more saturation is slightly, and I mean really slightly more on the 14 Ultra when it comes to the building itself. It also retains a little bit of that warmer feel and also slightly a bit more depth compared to the 14, which is down to having again that larger sensor compared to the 14 Ultra. I would say both are solid, but both need work when it comes to the dynamic range, especially looking at light sources. Zooming into this shot, the 14 Ultra is a bit down when it comes to the warmth of the shot itself. It should have a little bit more orange to it, but the 14 clearly went overboard here. It's too warm and too saturated, where the 14 Ultra also feels more detailed than on the 14. Either way, here's some more shots and then we showcase a little bit of a difference in terms of video recording.
Okay, 60 frames per second. Again, colors are more to what they are on the Xiaomi 14 Ultra. I will say it actually does it really well when it comes to having the right colors. Of course, you cannot zoom out with the 14, or you can with the 14 Ultra. You can also switch to the 3.2 times zoom and the 5 times zoom. Again, the Xiaomi 14 Ultra cannot at 4K 60 frames per second. Of the Xiaomi 14 and 14 Ultra, recording 4K 24 frames per second in that mode. Colors are better on the Xiaomi 14 Ultra. It's more what it really is compared to what we are getting on the Xiaomi 14. Both 4K 30 frames per second. Now the Xiaomi 14 Ultra can zoom out, but it did a weird movement to do so. But of course, the 14 Ultra, you can just click the different lenses that you have, the different focal lengths. But with the Xiaomi 14, you cannot. You basically manually have to use a slider, which definitely is a benefit for the 14 Ultra. Zoom into the 3.2 times zoom. Let's see if there's a quality change. Doesn't look like it. But I will say the image looks fine, at least on the phone itself.
Now of course, at the end the question is, do I think you miss out if you have the 14 instead of the 14 Ultra? And I would realistically say, not by that much. The 14 is still really solid when it comes to its performance, but both of them need some work, and I have stated that before when it comes to the 14 Ultra and the 14 itself. Both of them have that same over sharpening problem in some cases, especially when it comes to the 3.2 times zoom. Both of them really need to work at that, because in some cases it can completely ruin a shot. It happens on the main sensor sometimes as well, especially when it comes to the 14 Ultra and the flower shots itself, but it really shouldn't be that way, because Xiaomi knows how to do it. The 13 Pro was excellent in those 3.2 times zoom shots, especially when it comes to flowers, having that really natural look to it. Over sharpening isn't a good look, especially when it comes to flower shots and buildings. I just don't prefer it. That over sharpening look makes things look, well, too sharp, but it makes the images just look not alive. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's how I feel about it. It just looks a little bit messy. Either way, when it comes to the Xiaomi 14 and 14 Ultra, both of them are really capable. Is the 14 Ultra better? Yes. Is it much better? It depends. It's not an easy answer, especially when it comes to the Xiaomi 14 and 14 Ultra. When it comes to point and shoot, both are pretty comparable depending on the situation. However, go more in depth if you really want to take that photography approach, add an ND filter, play with the variable aperture, have of course the periscope with it. Then in those cases, if you use the Xiaomi 14 Ultra as it's supposed to be used, then yes, the Xiaomi 14 Ultra is definitely better than the Xiaomi 14. However, if you use the Xiaomi 14 and 14 Ultra the same way, I would say the difference is neglectable, depending on the situation. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this video comparing the Xiaomi 14 and the 14 Ultra. And again, I'm sorry that somehow I lost the footage comparing both of them directly in video recording. That would have been much nicer, of course. So I have to base it on the experience that I had with both of them when it comes to video recording. I just cannot put them next to each other. Yeah, because I cannot keep the phones always. Anyway, have a good one and talk to you guys in the next.